On today's edition of The Front Row, we are in the offices of the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra in the Downtown Cultural Arts District here in Lubbock, and our special guests are David Cho, who is the music director and conductor of the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra, and special guest Gerald Dolter. And before we get into the actual interview of The Front Row, if I could just digress for just one moment, and Gerald, if I could just say that you and I go back a long way.
30 years.
I played your audition when you came to Texas Tech.
I remember.
And since then, we've done so many things together. And this past spring, I was so delighted when you were inducted into the Walk of Fame here in Lubbock. So deserving. And it just blessed everybody who has ever had to work with you at Moonlight Musicals or at the music school. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a tremendous honor. And you know, people keep telling me, oh, you deserve it. And I think there are a lot more people that deserve this. And if I get this, I've got to bring a lot of people along with me, including the two of you that are sitting here at the table with me right now.
Well, you're a kind man. And I wanted to say that before we even began the interview because I think it's very necessary for people to know. David Cho, let me begin with you as we actually start the front row today. The Lubbock Symphony Orchestra has a concert coming up this weekend, and it's an all-Italian program. Tell us about it.
Yes, we're so excited to feature both orchestral and operatic composers. First half will be dedicated to Ottorino Respighi, who wrote lots of tone poems for the symphony orchestra medium. And second half will be dedicated to Giuseppe Verdi's Rigoletto.
Okay. When you say Respighi and tone poems, what do you mean by tone poem?
It's music that tells or depicts a picture. And Respighi wrote trilogy or triptych called Pines of Rome, Fountains of Rome, and Roman Festivals. And we're going to play one of them, which depicts the different days, different times of the day of the fountains. And it's both brilliant and one of the most amazingly beautiful music ever written. And we'll pair that with the same composer's The Birds. And it's a 5-movement short miniatures that is dedicated to his friends and artists and philosophers, and it depicts the birds. Yeah, dove, hen, you name it. Yeah,
right. Wonderful composer Respighi, and I'm sure that to our listeners who may have traveled to Rome and perhaps visited, say, the Trevi Fountain, they'll understand this music as it depicts all of these fountains, and it's very descriptive music, atmospheric music, right?
Yes. And not only as atmospheric, the brass love to play this because it's just features their brilliance, and it's so natural for them to be able to play with no hindrance, no holding back.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, they'll love that. And the audience will love it. This is wonderful music, right?
Absolutely. And most of the audience probably are familiar with the Pines of Rome, which is probably the better known of the three. However, this is a wonderful way to begin the program.
Well,
yeah.
Great. Full strength Lubbock Symphony Orchestra, right?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. And then the second half. Tell us about it.
Yes. So Amanda Key approached me that she had done some work on presenting operas in a way that it would be more digestible to the general public. So we've whittled down this 2.5-hour, 3-hour long opera to 43 minutes of the best of the best. And we picked and will feature the duets, the famous quartet, and of course Gerald Dolter will be Rigoletto.
Right. So this is not a staged opera with the orchestra in the pit and costumes or anything like that. It's just some of the highlights, excerpts.
Correct.
Right.
So the orchestra will be on stage and the singers will be closer to the audience, meaning they'll be behind me.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, we're very fortunate. We have the person singing the title role. Gerald Dolter is singing the role of Rigoletto. Tell us a little bit about your history with this opera.
Oh goodness. Actually, I studied Rigoletto as a student. I had no business doing it, but I studied the first aria, the Parisiamo. That was one of the first things that I ever learned. I think I was 18 years old, and I didn't know anything. But I heard a recording of it. I heard a recording of Leonard Warren singing it, and I thought, I think I could do that. And lo and behold, look where things go. Now, I didn't have a chance to sing it in Europe. I made my debut with it actually with Tulsa Opera, and I forget the year. It was probably in the early 1990s that I premiered it there. And I've sung excerpts of it with a couple of symphony orchestras, and then another full production of it in the Upper Midwest. And it's been nice. It's, as I told David when we first picked up and looked at this last spring when we were considering, and I said, David, I haven't picked this up for 30 years. Is it still there? Because it feels okay. And we agreed that it did. So I have to say, and I'm going to be the one to bring this up. I'm 69 years old, and it doesn't get any easier to do these things, but the heart is still there. And I have to tell you, Rigoletto is I'm kind of digressing into a different area here. I don't really have personally much in common with the character at all. I've been tremendously blessed through the years and well provided for, and Rigoletto was none of those things. As a matter of fact, he feels like he's cursed, and he says that. The first thing that I sing, as a matter of fact, in the production that we're doing, David, is "Quel vecchio malediva mi," which means that old guy cursed me, and he feels the curse. And Rigoletto he's a hunchback, and he's deformed, and it's held him back in his personal development and in his economic development and in what he could be. Now, what that did for him was make him a real sharp intellect. So I guess there was a little bit of an advantage, and again, this is fiction, but the music is so well written, it could be a true story.
Yeah. It's a big sing. He's on the stage all the time. And like you said,
pretty much,
it's hard physically because the character is deformed, and you have to become deformed and deal with that all night.
Yeah.
And you have to deal, as you said, with a character who has a lot of bad things. Although he had a wife who loved him.
Yes.
And you had a daughter.
And I had a daughter who loves him too. And he does his very level best to protect her from all the badness in the world, and is successful to a certain degree. But he ends up... should I give away what happens at the end, David?
Sure.
Is it okay? Everybody knows. I guess if you know the opera... He ends up having his own daughter killed.
Unbeknownst to him.
Yeah. He thought the Duke of Mantua was the one that was being murdered, and he opens up the sack that she is in at the very end and just cries in anguish. And of course, we're not doing it, but at the very, very end, after he discovers that, and she's dying, and then they sing this beautiful duet together. This is what happens in all opera. But yeah, it's tragic. It's tragic, and when you're performing the role, you almost have to put the tragedy aside, because if you were a real method actor and got caught up in all the horrible situation, it could spell disaster for you as a singer. So, and it's difficult to do that. The first time that I performed this role in Tulsa, I remember it was the Canadian Opera production of it, and Rigoletto was in a wheelchair. It not a real wheelchair, it was a chair on wheels. It looked like an office chair, but that's how I had to get around the stage. And the only part of my body that I could use, other than one leg was bad, I could push myself around with one leg, and I could gesture with one arm. And the only times I was able to get out of the chair and sing was climbing a staircase in Act 3, and then at the very, very end holding my daughter in my arms.
So what are the excerpts that you will perform in this concert?
It's at the very, very beginning, the Parisiamo. Actually there's a duet with the assassin before that even happens. We haven't even spoken about the assassin yet that does all of the dirty work. His name, the assassin's name is Sparfucil, and he's a real slick, smooth dude, and it's written in the music. And isn't it beautiful how it's accompanied on the cello? And there's a connection between the two of them too, because a lot of what Rigoletto sings is accompanied by that cello. The solo cello in the Cortigiani. I hear so much of Spadaffucile in that carries over into that. So. And he says that in his aria, the Parisiamo. He says, "A pair we are. I am the tongue, he has the dagger."
Yeah.
But we're the same. We're the same kind of people. So we start with that. Then this takes place in a courtyard, this meeting with the assassin. And he says to the assassin, "So when can I find you?" And the assassin says, "I'm here every night." And Rigoletto thinks, "I've never seen him here every night. Where is he hiding?" He only thinks that. So then after that, we go into the courtyard of the convent where Gilda's being kept. And we have this duet where we find out a lot about Rigoletto's past in the duet. And especially what we find out, though, is how much they love each other, how much they care for each other. And for Gilda, she doesn't care that her dad is deformed. He's her dad. Yeah. And so they talk about that. And so there's that. Maestro can talk about the rest of it. But, for me, there's after that duet is done, then we go into a little bit of the duet with the Duke. He shows up. Usually the tenor is the good guy in this opera.
Not in this case.
He's the bad, but the baritone's a bad guy too. This opera is full of bad characters. Gilda's the only one that's pure and good. And so then we have some more work where we see more about how bad the Duke is, and then we get to the end where we have the quartet at the very, very end. If you were to pull together, this is a perfect program for someone who's trying to learn about the opera for the first time, because you're getting the meat and bones of what the opera is. Right. If you come to this.
Great. So, David, this is a tragedy. All kinds of tragedies happen. There's curses, there's mistaken identities, and the wrong person is assassinated, and it just leads. But the music makes it all great, right?
Yes.
Right.
In the midst of all the salacious acts,
right,
arises this beautiful music. And we were briefly talking about Alice Ann's role, and although she has a very small role, it has a very pivotal point. She helps the two meet, and comes out the beautiful Caro Nome aria, and then it leads to the quartet, which I think we talked about it earlier in the week, how before all the social media or television, Verdi created what's called the split screen, two things going on at the same time, and it's just a true genius of Verdi. I want to go back to what Gerald was saying earlier. Rigoletto, it's such a complex and complicated character, and you said how it's you really can't relate to him, but I'm sure you will.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Personally, I can't. Personally, I can't. But of course, intellectually, the difficult part about being an actor is to figure out why people are doing what they're doing, and what has led them to take the actions that they've taken.
Yeah, and it's truly a tragedy that we are alike, and he's cursed, and he rails against his own deformity, his fate, as you were talking about, and actually like the whole mankind actually. So it's a real tragedy.
It is. Verdi picked some meaty stuff. He sure did. For people who are interested, give us, if you would, the ticket information.
Go to lubbocksymphony.org or call us at 762-1688. The concert is this Saturday, January 18th at 7:30 at the Buddy Holly Hall.
Wonderful. David Cho, music director of the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra. Gerald Dolter, our favorite baritone, singing the title role of Rigoletto in this concert version of some of the excerpts. Thank you both so much for being our guests on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clint.